What's up guys, welcome to the bunker. I'm Johnny. Thanks for stopping by. If you're a beginner woodworker or interested in starting but you don't know where to begin, you came to the right place. To get started, all you need is a handful of certain power tools that most anyone can quickly learn how to use. One very common beginner power tool that I recommend you start with is a circular saw. The circular saw is an extremely versatile tool and is able to perform many tasks that a table saw can. But unlike a table saw, the circular saw is portable. It can be used in many areas of your workshop without needing a specific workspace like you do with a table saw. In order to make the most of your circular saw, you first need to know what a circular saw is, the parts of the saw, and how to use it properly and safely. Circular saws are available in either corded or cordless. This saw cuts with a round blade which spins around an arbor axis. You push the saw through your material to make a cut. It can make straight cuts through plywood or miter cuts, which are angled cuts across the face of a board, bevel cuts, which are angled cuts across the thickness of a board, cross cuts, which are cuts made across the grain, and rip cuts, which are cuts that are made with the grain. Two good benefits of this saw is that it's handheld and portable. These saws come in various sizes. The size is determined by the diameter of the blade. The most common size is a 7 1/4 inch blade, which can cut through a max depth of about 2.5 inches. A circular saw is not only used to cut through plywood or lumber. With the proper blade, you can also cut through things like plastic, stone, concrete, and metal. They're also available in a left-hand blade or a right-hand blade. You can use whichever you prefer. Personally, I use the right-hand blade circular saw, and I am right-handed. It's important to get to know your circular saw before using it. Parts may look slightly different or be at slightly different locations. It just depends on the brand of saw that you have, but their functions are the same. So on the circular saw, you have the cord, which gives it power, the handle, the main handle right here for your dominant hand, and it has the handhold for your other hand. It helps to guide the saw better. You have an upper blade cover or upper guard, and you have a lower guard which is retractable, just like this. It's spring-loaded. These enclose the blade to protect you from the blade, and it also keeps debris and sawdust from flying into your face. This is the base plate or the shoe. This is used to place on your material that you're going to cut to keep your saw steady and level. Here you have the bevel adjustment right here with your different angle settings from 0 to 45 degree. And then you have the markings here on the base plate, which help guide your blade, so you know right at the 0 is where the blade's gonna cut, so you can run that notch right over your line as you're cutting. Then you have the spindle lock. The spindle lock, you have to depress this button in order to change your blade. And then you have the depth adjustment right here. You loosen it and it adjusts. Whenever you're adjusting the depth on your material, make sure that it protrudes no more than 1/8 of an inch past the thickness of your material. You also have the measurements right here for your depth adjustment that you can go off of that, or you can do it by eye, and just adjust it by looking at it, or you can use these measurements right here. And the main part of the saw right here that powers it on is your trigger right here. Some circular saws have a power lock switch, which is another button that you have to press before you can squeeze the trigger to power it on. But this does not have the power lock switch. It just has the trigger. Forgot to mention another part of the saw is the guard lever, which is this one right here. You can use it to manually retract the lower guard or the lower blade cover, just like that. What we're gonna do now, I'm gonna show you how to change the blade. On this saw, there's an Allen wrench right here. Okay, you put the Allen wrench into the bolt right here where the blade is. You press the spindle lock button, spin the blade till you hear the spindle lock into place. Then you're gonna turn counterclockwise so the bolt comes out. Then you take off the washer, put the saw on its side, retract the lower guard, remove the blade, and you install the new blade. This is a 7 1/4 inch 40 tooth finish and plywood blade. This is ideal for plywood You get cleaner cuts with it. The higher the tooth count, the smoother and cleaner your cuts will be, but they will cut slower than a blade with less teeth. Like the one that came with the saw is a 24 tooth blade. So that will cut a lot faster, but you'll have a rougher cut. So you install your new blade, put in the washer, the bolt on. You're gonna have to press the spindle lock button again to lock the blade right there. And then you just tighten the bolt right there. All set, guys. I wanna go over some safety tips before we use the saw. The first one is make sure to use safety glasses or goggles. Also make sure you don't have any loose hair, clothing, or jewelry when using the saw. Also make sure you unplug the saw whenever you're gonna do any blade changes or adjustments to the saw. You wanna make sure that your blade is securely attached. You wanna inspect your material, make sure there's no nails or screws within the material, because you don't wanna cut through that. You can get a bad kickback if you do that. So just make sure you check your material properly and thoroughly. Keep the power cord out of the way and behind you if possible. I recommend you always use a straight edge to make your cuts so that you can prevent blade binding and kickbacks. Make sure you use the two handles when you're using the saw so you can get better cuts and you can be safer and away from the blade. And the last one is do not attempt to do any freehand cutting or plunge cuts until you're more comfortable using the saw. Before using your circular saw, you'll need to do a few things before you start to ensure accuracy and to prevent wasted material. First thing is you want to make sure your saw is unplugged. Then you want to measure and mark your material, whether it's plywood or just dimensional lumber. Go ahead and get it marked. If you're using a straight edge, make sure you measure from the edge of your base plate to the blade so that you can properly set your straight edge the right distance from your cut line. This is the straight edge that I use. I just hook it on to one side of the plywood and then I clamp it to my side. It has these black rods, one on each side. That actually is the measurement from the edge of my base plate to the blade. So all I got to do is align the tip of that black rod on each side with the line and my circular saw will cut right on the line. If you don't have a straight edge like this, you can always use a straight piece of lumber so that your base plate can ride along to make your cut, or a long 4-foot level will also do the job. Next, you're going to set your blade depth to 1/8 inch past your material thickness. Make sure you check your bevel adjustment to make sure it's at 0 if you're doing a 90-degree cut, or at whatever angle you need. Just make sure it's set to the right angle. Another very important thing you have to do is make sure that your material is well supported on both sides as close to the cut line as possible. Some people use a thick insulation board that they place under the plywood. That can go on the floor or on the sawhorses. And you can just set your depth just 1/8 of an inch past your material and it'll cut into the foam insulation board, but it won't cut through the insulation. And it'll support your wood very well. What I use is my 2 sawhorses. I place some 2x4s on each end. I place my plywood on top. Then I make my cut perpendicular to the direction of my 2x4s. And that'll keep my plywood in place throughout and after the cut so nothing falls to the ground. Now we just plug in the saw and ready to go. Before getting to this point, make sure you've read the tool manual from front to back. The first thing you want to do is place the base plate on your material. Line up your blade with your cut line. Make sure you account for your kerf, which is the waste gap left behind by the blade. Make sure you're cutting on the proper side of the cut line. Make sure the blade is not touching the material when you power on the saw. So just stay back about 1/8 or 1/4 of an inch away from the material. Squeeze the trigger. Make sure the blade comes to a full speed before you start cutting into your material. Keeping the base plate on your material, just ease the saw forward with just enough pressure to let the blade do its job. Don't push too hard. Take it easy, take it slow. The blade will do all the cutting. Just put enough force so that it's moving forward slowly while keeping your finger on the trigger fully depressed. You're going to notice the lower guard begin to lift automatically as you proceed with your cut. Sometimes with angled cuts or thin material, the lower guard might not lift automatically, so you sometimes have to just grab the lower guard lever and lift it up manually until the saw starts moving forward. And as soon as you start cutting, you let go. Once your cut is complete, let go of the trigger. The blade will slowly come to a stop and the lower blade guard will close automatically as soon as you finish your cut. Cutting dimensional lumber can be accomplished by using a speed square. If you're cutting off a piece that's 6 to 8 inches long, you can support the piece off of the edge of your work table using your hand. If you're cutting a longboard in half, you need to support both sides. As far as using the speed square, set up the speed square with the T-edge against the long side, giving you a perpendicular guide to cut along. Then you just make the cut. If you're interested in woodworking, I hope this video helps and hopefully it will motivate you to start woodworking. If fear is holding you back, just know that knowledge greatly decreases that fear that tends to hold us back. With all that said, I want to thank you for watching. Y'all take it easy and remember, exercise your right to bear tools. Over and out.